Hello, everyone. My name is Jordan Scott, and for my reading ladder, I am going to be discussing racism and race related hate crimes. In this unit, we will be exploring how racism and race related hate crimes are portrayed in the media by analyzing different pieces of literature from the early 1600s to present day that depict racism in different ethnic communities. Our literature for this unit is A Look into the Greenwood Black Wall Street History Center, Angel of Greenwood, Strange Fruit, I'm Not the Indian You Had in Mind, Romeo and Juliet, Today I Am a Witness to Change, and Romeo Must Die. The first piece of literature that we will be discussing is the Greenwood Rising Museum walkthrough. This video shows a walkthrough of the Greenwood Rising Museum in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This museum is meant to commemorate the lives lost in the Tulsa Race Massacre and ensures that this part of history is not lost from lack of education.
I rise into a daybreak miraculously clear. I rise.
This is the crown jewel, the catalyst of what people will come from all over the world, all over the state, all over the country to be enlightened, to be educated, and to be informed about what was Greenwood. More importantly, how did Black Americans come to Oklahoma? What is it that drew them here? How they acquired their land, how they acquired their wealth, and what was it that made Greenwood so special? Then they will learn all the truth without any whitewashing or watering down. They will have the full truth of the massacre and experience it in all of its grittiness as the community expected and asked us to do. But it won't be left there. Then they go into the phase where they see what we call the changing fortunes, how Greenwood rebuilt itself without being able to file any insurance claims, without any remuneration from the city or for the government who were complicit in those activities of the massacre, but they'll be inspired that they rebuilt themselves and understand how urban renewal destroyed Greenwood a second time. And after they experience all that, they'll be invited to have a conversation, a communication space, the journey to reconciliation, and then be allowed to leave a commitment, a personal commitment, what I will commit to do to help break down racial biases and stereotypes and keep myself, now that I've learned this, hold myself to a standard of what I can do to help racial relations and reconciliation in the United States. It's all in one place, and that's what Greenwood Rising Black Wall Street History Center is about.
Because I'm the best barber on this side.
Two safe spaces that have always been and continue to be is the Black church and the Black barbershop and beauty salon. The love, the fellowship, the trust, the support, the banter that goes on, the politics of the day. To this day, you can go to any barbershop in any city, any Black barbershop, and you'll find that same feeling of belongingness no matter where you go. And so we wanted to highlight that was a part of Greenwood. We wanted to highlight that there were barbershops back then and even now. And so the hologram features is a part of the spirit of Greenwood, letting them talk to you about Greenwood and the spirit of Greenwood in the atmosphere of being in a barbershop. We really wanted to hone in on that history. Greenwood represented a threat that Black citizens could live on their own and prosper and be just as equal, if not even maybe supersede their white counterparts, if they are allowed to own and prosper and be left to themselves in that time period. They could excel and achieve. It was a threat, and when the opportunity afforded itself, those who were part of the Ku Klux Klan, who saw that as a threat, found the opportunity to destroy it. So we explain all of that, and you experience all that, and you see that. It's very moving, a very moving experience coming through here.
The reason I would have this placed as first in my unit is because it does give the students some information about Greenwood and the area of Tulsa that the Tulsa Race Massacre occurred in. I would pair this with a slideshow that presents them with even more information about the Tulsa Race Massacre, but I thought that this video showed them the life before the massacre, and it also introduces them to a museum that they could possibly go to on their own. The second piece of literature that we are going to be using and our main YA novel for this unit is Angel of Greenwood by Randy Pink. The summary for this book is, though they've attended the same schools, Isaiah never noticed Angel as anything but a dorky, Bible-toting church girl. Then their English teacher offers them a job on her mobile library, a three-wheel, two-seater bike. Angel can't turn down the money, and Isaiah is soon eager to be in such close quarters with Angel every afternoon. The life changes on May 31st, 1921, when a vicious white mob storms the community of Greenwood, leaving the town destroyed and thousands of residents displaced. Only then Isaiah, Angel, and their peers realize who their real enemies are. I would have this placed as second in my unit because it details the events from the Greenwood Rising Museum. It is a book about the Tulsa Race Massacre and how that affected the lives of those in the community and those who are individuals. In the book, Angel and Isaiah do come together and try to reconnect the community after this tragic event happened, and they are somewhat successful. But this book really encases the trauma that occurred from this race-related hate crime, and it does so by putting it into a YA level book that students can fall in love with and understand on their level. It introduces them to Angel and Isaiah, who are lovers, and they truly get to experience the tragic event that happened while thinking of what they would do in a situation if the person that they loved were to get hurt or if their family was to get hurt. A few questions I have for the students over Angel of Greenwood would be, how does Angel of Greenwood explore racism in early 20th century America? And how does the novel depict the impact of racism on individuals and communities? The next piece of literature we are going to be analyzing for this unit is the song Strange Fruit by Abel Meeropol, which is sang by Billie Holiday. The song is written in 1937. The song processed the lynching of Black Americans by comparing the victims to the fruit that hangs off of the trees. The song was written after Meeropol's poem Bitter Fruit, which was written after the authors saw a photo that depicted the lynching of two Black teens in Indiana in 1930. And I'm not sure if you saw, but in the Greenwood Rising Museum video, the song lyrics to this song are written on one of the walls in the museum.
Strange fruit. Southern trees bear strange fruit. Blood on the leaves and blood at the root. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze. Strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes twisted mouth, scent of magnolia, sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rock, for the tree to drop. Here is a strange and bitter cry.
The reason I would have this placed as third in our multimodal unit is because it had more themes of racism in the songs. The themes that they are using are darker and a bit more triggering. I wouldn't want to place this as first in my unit because I do want to give my students a bit of a heads up or a trigger warning before we get to this point in our unit. I think that starting them with the Greenwood Rising Museum video and then the young adult novel over the Tulsa Race Massacre sets them up to understand on their level what racism and race-related hate crimes are. And then using this directly after allows them to see it on an even bigger scale and a bit sadder. And I don't want for them to not have the information needed to fully understand this song. And I think that the first two things in this unit will give them this information along with a few other things that I will be doing, like the slides that I mentioned giving them when we were discussing the Greenwood Rising Museum video. The questions I have for this is, how does this song use imagery to convey its message about racism? And how does music serve as a tool for addressing social issues? The next multimodal unit piece of literature that we will be discussing is I Am Not the Indian You Had in Mind by Thomas King. This poem discusses racism and violence while bringing forth common stereotypes that Native Americans are often haunted by. The author confronts these stereotypes by naming them and telling the audience who the natives truly are. An excerpt from this poem I will read. So damn you for the lies you told, and damn me for not being bold enough to stand my ground and say that what you've done is not our way. But in the end, the land won't care which one was rabbit, which one was bear. Who did the deed and who did not? Who did the shooting and who got shot? Who told the truth, who told the lie? Who drained the lakes and rivers dry? Who made us laugh? Who made us sad? Who made the world Monsanto mad? Whose appetites consumed the earth? Was it me? Was it me? Was it me? For what it's worth. Or maybe it was. I would place this after Strange Fruit because it is a bit of a break from the heavy themes of racism while still conveying the theme of this unit. It also allows the students to understand that racism can and does happen to other ethnic communities, cultures, and people who may not look like them. I fear that we sometimes only think that African Americans deal with racism when in reality it's African Americans, Native Americans, Asian communities, and anyone who may be considered different from the stereotypical white male. And this poem truly lets them see on the Native American side how they deal with racism and these stereotypes that they are haunted by. And the questions I have for this is define the term stereotype. What stereotypes does King's poem evoke? How does this poem discuss racism and violence? And how can art and literature be used to address stereotypes and misconceptions? Our next main piece of literature that we are going to be discussing is Romeo and Juliet. While Romeo and Juliet is not inherently about racism and hate crimes, those two themes can be interpreted from this play through the dispute between the Capulets and the Montagues. This rivalry can be read as a metaphor for racism because it involves two different families that do not like each other due to their last names. The reason the two sides are feuding is never actually said in the play, and violence and death are the results of the feud. This, just like Angel of Greenwood, is more on the young adult side, and they will better understand it because it has themes of romance between two young adults, 14, I believe, and it really appeals to them as a teenager. But what I'm wanting them to understand from this specific piece of literature is that racism can be a metaphor in multiple things that we don't realize. You don't have to have one character be white and one character be black, brown, to actually be talking or discussing about racism. And the feuding in this book and the violence and death that it results from is a metaphor for the race-related hate crimes that these people deal with on a daily basis. I would place this after everything else in this unit leading up because I want the students to understand what racism is and what race-related hate crimes are. That way they can fully understand the extent of this metaphor and actually grasp the concepts that this story is trying to convey to them. The questions I would use for this is, how does the feud in Romeo and Juliet parallel modern racial conflicts? And how do the characters overcome or fail to overcome their prejudices? The next piece of literature is Today I Am a Witness to Change. This is a community poem, so it doesn't have one specific author. And it is produced and edited by Mark Rivers and Raina Advani. The poem is a collection of different people's experiences with racism. It details how racism affects the day-to-day lives of people, specifically in the Asian community, and explores the trauma caused by the racism. An excerpt from the poem reads, "The Steak and Shake waitress in 2006 who outright refused to wait on me, who threw the menu in great disdain. The young woman in Alum Creek who was with her boyfriend, who threw a stone at me because I was doing my Tai Chi at the top of the 116 steps that I loved to go up and down. I want to be somewhere and nowhere at once. I cringe at our disunity. I stand back in awe of the never diminishing divisiveness. I cry for the misunderstood and those that misunderstand. Today, I tell my youngest child that when I was a child, I wished I was white. I was silent. I allowed people around me to mispronounce my name." This poem, while it does not directly discuss heavy hate-related crimes, it does show the students that race hate crimes can happen on a much smaller scale than what we are typically used to seeing. In stanza 2, it talks about the young woman in Alum Creek whose boyfriend threw a stone at the person because they were doing Tai Chi. And while this may not be inherently seen as a race-related hate crime, it is a crime against someone who is of a different race because they are of a different race. That is a race-related hate crime. And I want the students to understand that just because something may not be up to scale with the Tulsa Race Massacre, it is still very much there, and the racism and race-related hate crimes are still happening. This also allows the students to see from an Asian community standpoint of what racism is like and how things happen in their day-to-day lives. The question I would pair with this is, how does this poem depict the trauma that is caused by racism? And I would have it placed at this point in the unit because I want the students to understand that race-related hate crimes do not always have to be full-blown massacres. They can be something as simple as throwing a rock at someone because you don't like the color of their skin. And I think that having this placed after Romeo and Juliet for them to understand the metaphor of Romeo and Juliet will allow them to better understand the severity of this poem and how it still is racism and about race-related hate crimes. The last piece of literature that we are going to be analyzing is Romeo Must Die. It was released in 2000 and directed by Andrzej Bartłowiak. In this martial arts take on Shakespeare's famous tragedy, an ex-policeman is jailed for a crime he didn't commit, and he breaks out to avenge his brother's death in America. There, he meets Trisha Day, and as they fall in love, she helps him in his search. Her father knows more about Lee's brother's death than he should, and soon he and Lee are at war. This movie actively depicts the metaphor of racism from Romeo and Juliet. I have it placed at this point in the unit because I want the students to first read Romeo and Juliet and connect the metaphor of racism to that story. And then I want them to see this metaphor actively being shown to them. I want them to understand it with this movie. I want them to see how this metaphor plays out and the severity that was this metaphor. The questions I have for this is, how does this modern adaptation of Romeo and Juliet explore the metaphor of racism in Shakespeare's original writings? Compare and contrast Romeo and Juliet to Romeo Must Die. And how do adaptations of classic works reflect changing societal issues and concerns? That's another reason I have it placed as last in my unit, is because I want the students to see how an adaptation, a modern adaptation, can change for how our society has changed. And while the original Romeo and Juliet is not inherently about racism, it truly is about racism. And in this modern adaptation, it further discusses our societal issues that we need to be concerned with. I did include a few other texts that further discuss racism from different communities. One being American Born Chinese by Jean Loing Yang. It is a graphic novel that tells 3 stories about identity, friendship, and personal transformation. The stories are woven together to explore themes of identity, prejudice, racism, popular culture, pride, stubbornness, humility, and storytelling. The transformation of the characters become a metaphor for cultural assimilation. This story furthers the narrative of racism in the Asian communities and will allow students to further their knowledge of racism in other communities besides Black Americans. I also included a book about a Persian Jordanian American teen who deals with racism, as well as The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, which is a well-known story about a 9-year-old German boy named Bruno who befriends a Jewish prisoner at the Auschwitz concentration camp during World War II. And this story, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, will allow them to see that even if somebody who may look like you, they are still dealing with racism, and racism is still very real. It goes deeper than just somebody's skin tone, and I think that this story captures that and teaches that very important lesson. And the last story I included is The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas, which is a young adult novel about a 16-year-old Black girl named Star Carter who witnesses the police shooting of her unarmed childhood best friend Khalil. I think that all students would benefit from reading this, especially with things that have come into the news in the recent years of police brutality against Black Americans. And I also think that this would further their knowledge of how racism really is towards Black Americans. And all of these texts are excellent reads for them to get rid of the ignorance around racism and understand the severity of it and the race related hate crimes that these people deal with on a daily basis that we don't typically see. Here's my references page. It goes from the first bit that we used for the actual unit, and then my other texts that I included are at the bottom. Thank you.